Anthony, Blake, and Dylan, the cold sliced. Ooh.
Everything starts over here, basically. We've got, this is the milling area, so this is our grain mill right here. We pick up our grain from the distributor, we bring it in, it comes in bags of whole malted grain. The purpose of the mill isn't to grind it or crush it, but in other terms, it's to more or less, I guess crush is a good word for it, to expose the starch that's in the grain, because the grain, after it's malted, contains a super high level of starch.
Okay.
And starch is what brewers want to convert to sugar, which ultimately makes the alcohol in the beer. So we're trying to extract the sugar from the grain is what we're doing. So by crushing it and getting the insides of it exposed, we're able to do that. We mill it. It goes through this tube right here, which is basically an auger. There's a big corkscrew inside of that thing, and it pulls the grain up, over, and into that cone-shaped tank that's above the mash tun there. That tank is called a grist case. What the grist case does essentially is just hold the milled grain until we're ready to start mashing into the mash tun. This is the mash tun right here. The purpose of the mash tun is we mix hot water with the grain, and that starts a conversion process, which takes that starch and converts it over to sugar. So this is where we add calcium sulfate in here to help lower the pH. You want to get the pH just right in the mash. The definition of mash is typically just your hot water grain mixed together. It's like looks like oatmeal almost.
Yeah.
So there's a few things we have to do to make sure that we're getting the proper conversion in there of starch to sugar. A lot of testing that has to go on throughout that process. About an hour or so in that tank for that conversion process to take place, to finish up. Then we take the beer. We do what's called Vorlauf, which we run the beer out. It's called wort at this point. It's not called beer quite yet. We run the wort out of the tank, through the pump system, through the manifold, and we basically loop it right back in and spray it over the top of the grain bed in there. And we do that for a certain amount of time, just until we can see in this right here is called a grant. We can see in there as it's transferring and looping like that, we can see the beer actually clearing up a little bit. We don't want a lot of the grain husks and the solids coming out of the mash tun going into the boil kettle. We want to try to remove all that. So we allow the grain bed to act as its own filter. So we kind of cycle it through for a little while, about 10-15 minutes, until we see that the wort is cleared up in here enough that we're happy with it. Then we shut the pump down, change over the manifold, and then we start moving that wort over into the boil kettle. This is the boil kettle right here. The main purpose of the boil kettle, there's a couple really important ones. One, which is the most important, I think, is the pasteurization. This is where it cleans it all up and kills anything that could potentially contaminate our yeast and cross-contaminate the entire batch and ruin the entire batch. So pasteurization takes place in here. Also, the boil kettle is very important for adding hops at different times throughout the boil. You're getting your bittering from that. You're getting a lot of your aroma, some of your aroma and flavor from that as well, by adding hops at the very end of the boil process. So a lot of different things going on in there. There's other things that we do during the boil process. If you're putting lactose in beer, that's where we would add the lactose. Allow that to boil in there for a little bit as well.
Why would you add lactose?
Lactose, there's a lot of beers that actually have lactose. A lot of hazy IPAs, you'd be surprised at how many have lactose. A lot of stouts, a lot of sweet stouts or milk stouts have lactose.
Okay.
I mean, milk stout.
Yes, I see it with one of
that
those,
one would make sense, yeah.
The thing with lactose is it doesn't ferment. It can't ferment. The yeast can't break that sugar down into alcohol. So that sugar stays behind in the beer and actually adds a sweet flavor to that beer.
Oh.
So that's why a lot of your hazy IPAs have kind of a little bit heavier of a mouthfeel and maybe a little bit of sweetness to it. Sure. Same with the stouts and things like that also have lactose. We don't do a lot of lactose in our brews. We do in one of our stouts and in our staple Norse Code hazy IPA, but those are the only two. We've played with it with other ones too, but yeah, it's fun. When the boiling's all done, you've got all the hops and all your other stuff done in there. We run it through the heat exchanger. The heat exchanger takes it from, well, let me back up. We do a whirlpool process too. The whirlpooling, basically it's the pump just whirlpools the beer in there. And it is called beer at this point because it's been boiled and everything, the hops and everything have been added. So we're calling it beer now instead of wort. The whirlpooling process literally whirlpools the beer in there. And the reason we do that is that it takes all the solids, all the proteins, that have separated during the boiling process, any hop vegetation that's in there from the hops being in there. And the whirlpooling process takes all that solid material, brings it to the middle, and it allows it to drop into a nice little pile right in the bottom of that boil kettle for us. So that when we start to extract the beer from here and go through our heat exchanger, we don't bring all of that solid material through and into our fermentation tank.
Sure.
So literally when we're done, it's called knocking out. When we're done knocking out, which is the process of taking the hot beer, cooling it down really fast and pumping it into one of the fermentation tanks over there, what's left in here is a little cone-shaped pile of protein and hop vegetation, and maybe a little bit of grain husk that might have came through from the mash tun.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we use a combination of cold water and glycol, propylene glycol that runs through the plate system on our heat exchanger. So it cools that beer down from basically boiling temperature, which is over 200 degrees, and it drops it down to like 60 degrees within a matter of seconds as it runs through there.
Okay.
The beer is then pumped through after it goes through the heat exchange and cools down, it runs through our transfer hose, which goes over to the cellar side. This whole side right here is the hot side. This is the brew house. Okay. Mash tun is the first stage. Boiling is the second stage. This big tank over here, all this is essentially a big, huge hot water heater.
Okay.
So
cool.
it's a 900 gallon hot water heater, and it keeps 200 degree water in there. So we use that hot water to get the mash going at the very beginning. We use that hot water to clean. When we go to clean and sanitize our tanks, we use that hot water during the cleaning process. But it's mainly used for the brewing process here as a majority. So that beer goes through, it's cooled off, it runs over through that transfer hose over to the cold side, which is we call it the cellar. The cellar side, which is where all the fermentation takes place. So here's the other end of that hose right here. After the hose has been sanitized and ready to go, we start pumping that beer through it. We hook the hose up to one of these tanks, whichever one we've prepped for that particular brew day. And by prepping, I mean it's gone through a caustic wash and then a sanitation process before any beer goes into it. So these things are like brand new in between brews inside. I mean, there's absolutely nothing in there that's going to contaminate when we're done cleaning it and sanitizing it.
Okay.
Beer goes in. Once everything's out of the boil kettle and the tank is full, we close off all the valves, disconnect the hose, clean everything out over there, clean out the hose, get the hose pump full of caustic, and get it ready for the next batch the next day or whenever we happen to be brewing next. The tank's now full of beer. All we got to do is add our yeast to it, and we can either add harvested yeast. That's basically yeast that we've harvested off of a previous batch of beer. And we do that. We will try to get as many generations as we can, up to 6 or 7 generations is where we like to cut it off.
Sure.
So we'll pitch a batch of yeast to start a brand new batch. It'll ferment. The beer's done. We take that yeast off when it's done fermenting. We put it in a brink. It's just basically a tank, and we put it in the cooler and we store it. When it's time to do another batch of beer that requires that same yeast strain, we pull a sample of that beer. We throw it under the microscope. We test to make sure that the viability is there, that we've got the right amount of live yeast cells versus dead yeast cells.
Really?
Yep. And then we calculate out how much of that yeast, based on the viability, how much of that yeast we're gonna need to pitch into that next batch of beer.
Okay.
So every time you go from one generation, 2 generations, every time you kind of lose a little bit of that viability, which is why we only get 6 or 7. We like to cut it off around 7 at the most.
Gotcha.
Sometimes we don't even brink it. Sometimes we'll just, on the darker beers, we'll use it one time. It might already be on its 3rd or 4th generation by then, but we'll just dump it after that. The dark beers kind of taint that yeast. We can't really use it again for another, say a lager or something. Yeah, another ale or something, or an IPA. We could use it again for the same exact dark beer we just used it for. But we would rather just dump it after it's been used in a dark beer and just start with another batch of ale yeast from a different batch.
So apart from
Cost savings, is there another benefit to that? Like pulling that yeast out of there and...
Yeah, I mean, every brewer wants to control everything. Controlling your own yeast and managing your own yeast is, I think, part of the craft involved in making good beer.
I did not know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Like with the
Either, but it's super scientific.
I know.
I was like, wow,
we never would have made it.
No.
Yeah, a lot of brewers, I mean, they have a whole setup for their yeast management. They'll have a whole department within their brewery that is dedicated just to yeast management.
Okay.
We're pretty old school here. We do like to manage our own yeast to a certain extent, but we like to also just keep it fresh whenever if there's any doubt at all, you know, if it's been in the brink where we think it's maybe been in there 1 or 2 days too long, we'll just dump it and we'll start with a fresh batch of yeast.
Yeah. Okay. So no real like flavor profile gets, unless you go from the dark to the lager or something.
Yeah, which we wouldn't do that, but yeah, the flavor profile, and that's really important too, in using the same yeast strain and trying to manage that same yeast as much as you can. You are going to make a more consistent flavor profile too.
Yeah.
Because each yeast strain could be slightly different.
Sure. Do you guys ever worry about, in the spirit of consistency, do you ever worry that maybe a distributor that distributes to you your yeast is going to go out of business and you're going to lose that strain, or does it not work like that?
It doesn't really work like that. I mean, I suppose that's possible. And that, I guess, would go back to why it would be more important for every brewery to kind of manage its own yeast and have its own like setup just for yeast management. So yeah, if that ever happened, I'm not sure what we would do. We would probably just have to rethink the recipe and go with a different yeast manufacturer than the one we've used, before. And it would be okay. It might change the flavor profile a little bit of the beer, but I don't think it would be enough that too many people would notice.
Sure.
And the beer is still going to be great, regardless. So
definitely. Huh.
yeah. So yeah, once the beer is fermented and we pulled the yeast off of it, dry hopping, you've heard of dry hopping. That's when you have an IPA that you want to really throw a big punch of hop aroma to that beer. So you can add hops directly to the beer after it's done fermenting. You can actually add hops directly to the beer during fermentation too, to really get those hops agitated while the fermentation process is happening. So there's lots of different things you can do during fermentation, and right after fermentation. You can add things like vanilla or spice, cinnamon sticks, things like that. You can put things in the tank to kind of help give a different profile to a specialty beer too.
A question that may or may not be piggybacking off of that, but like with the dry hops that you're talking about, or adding that, and maybe this is universally known and I just have no idea. Very true, probably. But when it comes to you have an IPA and then you can find double IPAs or triple, what does that mean to have, other than it's really bitter and strong?
The double triple typically refers to not only the level of bitterness, but the alcohol content as well.
Okay.
So a double is going to be higher alcohol. A triple is going to be even higher, and the triples are typically off the scale for bitterness. So somebody that just wants a real super bitter, 100% hop forward beer that's super strong, really high in alcohol, upwards of 9% or more, then a triple is what they're going to look for. So that's really the difference between an IPA, a double, and a triple. It's the bitterness and the alcohol, really, and the hop, the level of hop profile that's in it too.
Interesting. I don't know what I thought. Maybe it was
I was
twice.
they do it again. Yeah, that's what I thought. I was they run it back through. I don't
start
know.
the process
it's
again.
Stronger now.
No, that's not the case. So yeah, once we've got all of our everything we want in that beer after fermentation's done, yeast is out, we've got all our spices or whatever we're putting in it, then it's time to cold crash it, which means literally you're going to take it from that fermentation temp that was at, and you're just going to drop it down really fast to 34 degrees. Okay. At that point, everything that's left in suspension in the beer will start to settle out, and you'll start to get what we were talking about earlier, the natural clarification of the beer will start to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's the process that here in our brewery, we just allow time for that to happen. We'll let that cold crash, after we've cold crashed, we'll let that beer kind of sit, condition, and clarify longer than we probably need to. If we wanted to throw it through a filter, we could get it in kegs right away.
Yeah.
So
which one of these do these all have some sort of beer in them right now?
Yep.
So
Except for the one that's right here.
Yeah. How many kegs do you typically get out of? I mean, how many gallons is this?
yeah, so this one right here is a 20 barrel tank. 20 barrels is 620 gallons. So we can get roughly, if you're thinking of a half barrel size, a full keg, there's roughly 40 kegs in here.
Gotcha.
Okay. The other ones, they're smaller. The rest of them are only 10 barrel. So that's 310 gallons, and it's roughly 20 kegs.
Okay.
And we do a mixture of keg sizes. We have half barrels and we have 6 barrels here. 6 barrels are a little over 5 gallons each. So when we keg beer, we usually fill 15 or so half barrels, and then we fill a bunch of 6 barrels, and that way we have a variety. When our distributor orders, we have a variety to sell.
Gotcha. Wow.
So.
Okay.
What would you say? We can cut this if you want to as well, but like, what does a typical kegging day look like? And then how many are you pulling out of here at the end of the day? They obviously all go in cold storage, I assume.
Yeah. So, a kegging day it's not a long day. We try to do as much as we can on brew day, because brew day takes a whole day. If we do a single batch, we can usually wrap brewing up in about 6 or 7 hours for one batch. If we do a double batch and fill the 20 barrel tank, it'll take us about 10 hours.
Okay.
Throughout that day, though, the brewing process itself, there's a lot of standing around and waiting. So during that standing around and waiting time, we try to fill that with kegging or cleaning a fermenter or something. Or cleaning kegs themselves. So in terms of just kegging off one batch of beer, we could probably do it in about an hour.
Oh, wow.
To keg 20 kegs, to fill 20 kegs. Some breweries might be able to do it quicker. The process we use takes us about an hour. And then cleaning it would probably take about another hour to get it cleaned out, get the caustic loop through it, and then sanitize it and have it ready to go for the next batch.
So now do you work with, do you have a crew that comes by, or is it just you and, you can't see Ari, but
Ariana. Yep. Ariana and myself, we do everything out here.
Just you two?
Yep.
So you go the whole process?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, we do everything. So we'll come out here, we'll start mashing in the grain. She'll fire up the keg cleaner and start cleaning some kegs. I'll keg some off. She'll palletize and run them into the cooler, and she does all the fancy writing on the labels and stuff, because my writing's really sloppy. But yeah, we do it all, the two of us. There is some occasion, we do canning days where we actually bring in our mobile canning contractor to come and help us do that.
Okay.
They have their own staff that runs the equipment. So we just need people to offload the cans into cases and get them packaged up in the cooler, palletized. So we'll bring in friends and family that just want to come and do it for fun.
Yeah.
But we've never really had to employ anybody to do that. And those are really the only days that we need help.
For sure.
For now anyways.
Yeah.
Our production pace right now allows us to keep up, just the two of us. And to be honest, we could probably close to double where we're at right now in production and still be able to keep up.
Wow.
But there will come a day where we will need help, and we're not opposed to hiring help out here.
For sure.
I will say at the very beginning, I did have help with the first few brews that I did, because the big system was all new to me after just coming off of a life of home brewing.
Yeah.
So a little bit intimidating when you see all these huge tanks and you're like, is this going to be as easy as home brewing? It's like not on the kitchen stove anymore, right? In a pot. So fortunately for me, a good friend of mine who is now, he's the owner and co-owner and head brewer at Lewitt Brewing.
Oh, wow.
His name is Landon Smith. He's been a family friend for quite a while, and he came out and he worked with me the first 3 or 4 batches of beer that we did. Probably even more than that, but he was a big help in getting started and kind of teaching me. He went to school, has a degree in fermentation, and he knows all about the yeast management, and literally he knows about all the science involved in brewing. He's an expert, I would say.
Okay.
So awesome resource. Probably not a lot of startup breweries get an opportunity like that, and I feel really fortunate to have him.
Yeah.
To have had him help us out. So that, other than that, really never had anybody out here.
Yeah,
helping us. So
I mean, if I could, throw my own 2 cents in there, I would say that you guys are. I mean, who knows? Ridgefield is expanding every single day. It feels like there's something new out there. You guys have food carts out there now, which is that's insane to me.
yeah,
I don't know about anyone else. It was like Ridgefield was like.
I haven't been out there in a long time, so when I went back out, I was like, whoa.
I know it's way different now, but I mean, I could see you guys needing to expand quick.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, expansion. I mean, we're not opposed to expansion, but the idea of the reason that I started this business to begin with was just it was a passion.
Sure.
And I definitely don't want it to get to a point where the passion goes away and the love for this labor goes away. I really want to continue to love doing it.
Yeah.
So there will come a time through our expansion that we'll probably just have to say, okay, brakes are going to come on and we're just going to be happy with where we're at.
That's the level.
So we're not interested in being an Anheuser-Busch or even a Hop Valley or anybody like that. We have some of our really good friends own breweries around here, and they're a lot bigger than we are, and we respect that. We respect their growth and what they've been able to do. And do we want to be to that caliber? Maybe, and maybe we'll change our mind between now and 5 years from now. But for now, our thought process is we love doing it. We want to continue to love doing it. And I think one of the factors that would contribute to us not loving to do it would be to where if it really became a job.
Yeah, definitely.
And it doesn't feel like a job right now.
You guys are definitely, I feel like, in the sweet spot right now. I mean, you have like this neighborhood brewery, and like I said, the city's expanding. So it's like, you're only going to have a bigger customer base here in less than a year, So
Sure.
sweet spot for sure.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's what makes you guys so unique, I think.
We like to think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes us proud to know that we have such a really cool community, and it's small still, and we're a good part of it right now. We got in on the beginning of the real serious growth around Ridgefield, and so we're just growing with it, and feels good. It's a great community. It's a great place to live. It's all of our customers and local businesses around us, around the tap house. Everybody's just wonderful.
Yeah.
The support system is incredible. It really is.
Well, I think we hit it all, right? For the most part, for the layman.
We got the beer. We got the beer from grain and into kegs and cans. So I think that's And then there's just a lot of cleaning. In between all that, there's just a lot of cleaning that goes on. If there's not any actual brewing process tasks that need to happen, then we're out here. We're scrubbing foot plates on the tanks, and we're scrubbing floors, and we're scrubbing tank exteriors, and just trying to keep everything looking good on the outside as well as the inside.
Yeah.
Because cleanliness is definitely one of the biggest, most important things in a brewery, is to maintain good sanitation, and you can't have anything contaminating beer.
Yeah, that's what you were saying. You're like, if anything gets into the pasteurization process, it's over, right?
Once it's been pasteurized at the boil kettle, comes over to these tanks. Yeah, it's vital that everything is super clean. Yeah, your yeast needs to be the only thing living in that tank at that point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just curious, how do you guys deal with the off-gassing for the fermentation?
So during fermentation, it's CO2, right? That's what the yeast produces. It produces alcohol and CO2 when it's breaking down that sugar. So during fermentation, if we closed up the tanks and just let it go, the tanks would ultimately explode at some point. So if you look over here, this tank is still set up. It just finished fermentation, so it's closed off right now. But this tube right here goes down into a bucket of water. That bucket of water acts as an airlock, basically.
Okay.
So during fermentation, that bucket of water is bubbling, constantly bubbling. During the heat of fermentation, it's bubbling really rapidly. There's gas, there's CO2 blowing through this, coming from the top. It's blowing through this tube and into that water.
Okay.
The water keeps anything from going back up into the tank, any air or airborne anything from getting in there and contaminating the beer.
Gotcha.
So that's how we gas it off, is just basically through this vent hose and into a bucket of water, which is essentially an airlock. When the fermentation's all done and it's the gassing off has slowed way down to where it's minimal, like maybe one bubble every minute, we close it off and we allow the very last portion of that fermentation process to kind of help do a little bit of natural carbonation in the beer.
Oh, gotcha.
It creates a little bit smaller bubbles, finer bubbles, and if we were really wanting to do full natural carbonation, there's a timing process in there where you lock it up, you close it up, allow the last bit of fermentation to fully carbonate your beer. But we use carb stones to finish off the carbonation. It's literally a stone rod that goes in there. We hook CO2 up to it. You set it to a certain pressure, and then you allow it to to carbonate that beer over a course of a certain amount of time.
That's kind of cool. I didn't know that was a thing.
And then you test it too. There's a testing device that we use to actually see where the CO2 volumes are in the beer, so that all of our CO2 and all the carbonation can be consistent.
Sure.
And that's not just us. I mean, all brewers use the same method.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
What I know you kind of brought it up a little earlier, but you guys are, I'm not going to tell you where, but you guys are kind of out in the country.
Yeah.
So where does all of this come from? You're like, you know, where do you get your water? You don't exactly tell us where you get the grain, but in particular, like what makes your guys' brewing process unique?
Yeah, well, I can tell you where we get the grain. We source all of our grain and most of our hops from a company called BSG, Brewer Supply Group. They're a national chain. Their headquarters out of Minneapolis. So it's one of the bigger distribution companies for brewing supplies.
Sure.
So we get all of our grain there. Probably 90% of our hops come from there. We get a lot of our yeast from there. The one strain of yeast we get from more local organic yeast company in Portland. Our water supply, that's where I think we're a lot different than a lot of brewers. You know, we built this brewery. This building was built for this brewery.
Okay.
We are, like you said, we are on our property here, like where home is on this property. We had a big space in the back of the property. I thought, I'm going to build a brewery back there.
Yeah.
So
I know that's like every guy's dream, I think.
Yeah.
it's like the ultimate man cave.
Yeah.
So yeah, we designed the brewery, we designed the building around the brewery basically.
Sure.
Fortunately, I had a family member at the time when I started all this. He used to be the vice president at Red Hook Brewing. And when he retired from there, he became a consultant and he started just helping build breweries and different beverage manufacturing facilities all over the country. I think all over the world ultimately.
Really?
So he helped me with the design, the layout, sourcing of some of the equipment, things like that. So
Is this Baldwin?
no.
Oh,
No.
okay.
That's a different story. Yeah. I'll leave his name out of it, but he's a great guy, super knowledgeable in the industry. He's helped a lot of breweries, a lot of startups. So he kind of helped with the footprint and get the ball rolling for me on this. Going back to our water supply, being out here in the country like this, we don't have domestic water source for the brewery. So we had to drill a well.
Yeah.
And, we got the water rights permit and all that. And we drilled a 350-foot deep well, and we have absolutely incredible water supplied to this brewery. Not a lot of breweries can say that.
I'm not going to say any of them, but I'm going to say I think you guys are definitely a small portion.
It's definitely it's very unique, and we're really proud of that. Our water is pristine here. We had it tested. When they were drilling, they hit water at a certain depth, tested the water. Nope. Go down deeper, hit water again, test it again. Nope. So we just kept going until we got down to 350 feet, and that water quality came back as right where we wanted it. The mineral quality in the water is high, but it's yeast loves that kind of stuff too. So
Sure.
It's just great water. It's perfect water. Well water. Who wouldn't want well water, right?
Yeah.
Using well water in a beer, we don't have to add anything in at the mash to offset any chemicals, fluoride or any of the chlorine or anything like that comes in domestic water.
I don't even know how you would offset that.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, the breweries do it. There's things that you put in there to help remove that those profiles from that stuff. So, but yeah, we're fortunate. We have a well. We have our own well, and our beer is. We're proud to say that our beer is made with pure artisan water that comes from 350 feet underground.
That is pretty cool.
That is not treated or chemicals added to it at all.
Yeah.
So, pretty awesome. We have a local farmer that literally lives right behind us on the property right behind us. They've got a 20 or 30 head of cattle back there. They come at the end of brew day and they pick up all the solids. Anything solid that comes out of brewing, whether it be yeast, hops, or grain, anything that we can get out of these tanks when we're cleaning them that's solid, we put in the barrels. We mix it with grain. When we pull the grain out of the mash tun, they bring their pickup out here, and we load it all up and they take it and feed it to the cows. And the cows absolutely love it.
I bet.
And that's a pretty common thing. Most breweries will do that. They source farmers and the farmers come and pick the grain up.
You get a little anything back? You had a cow back, piece of a cow.
You know, we've actually used a couple different farmers, and we have gotten some steaks before.
Yeah.
So, but not a whole live cow, no.
You guys get that? Like kickback, but it was a cow.
Yeah.
That was the joke. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. But you know, it's great. What's really cool about our situation with our neighbors being that farmer is that we get to look out at the back of our house, or here when we're out in the brewery, we get to look right over the fence out here, and we get to see those cows walking around.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So, and it's almost like they're looking at us sometimes saying, "Hey, thanks."
Yeah. That's, yeah, you guys, it's, you almost have this like perfectly recycled is what kind of what it sounds like.
Yep.
You've got well water, you know, from the ground, and then you take everything that's left, you give it to the cows, and maybe you get a little bit of cow back.
And then we drink the beer.
Yeah, you drink the beer, yeah. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking us on a walkthrough. You got any questions for him?
Not that I feel like he kind of took me through the whole
I think so,
the
yeah.
whole thing. At this point, I'm like, wow, I need to rethink my knowledge on beer.
I know. I was like, oh, cool, I didn't know anything.
It's like, no wonder we failed when we tried.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't even know half the words he was using.